I have the pleasure of introducing my friend MJ, or Mary Jo.
Thank you, Dave. First of all, him calling me MJ reminds me of something that I come from Chicago, the Chicago area. I don't come from there originally, but I've lived there most of my life now. And for those of you who are familiar with Michael Jordan, the basketball player, his nickname was MJ. And there was a job I had where there was another Mary Jo in the department. Now, there aren't that many of us in the world that I've run across anyway. And they called her MJ. And I wouldn't let anybody call me MJ for a long time because she was terrible. And so once she left the company finally and the sun now shines and everything's wonderful again, then I said, okay, now you can call me MJ. So thank you for attending this amazing event. And I feel very privileged to be up here giving this talk, and that we're all part of such an historic event here in Sweden, with so many different countries represented. I want to personally thank Frederick. Where are you nearby, Frederick? Okay. Frederick introduced me to Facebook Messenger. I've had a Facebook account forever, but I don't use it, and so now the whole world is out there that I've been friends with forever saying, why aren't you talking to me? But thank you. We had a lot of time together planning ahead. And I also want to thank the host committee. Are any of you here in this room, the host committee? Please stand up. Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. Thank you. Okay. You all did an amazing job of organizing everything, and we're very appreciative. And to all the volunteers, there must be other volunteers in this room who have the yellow, who've worn the yellow lanyard. Okay, but thank you all. Tack. You've made us all feel so welcome, and we're grateful. I also want to congratulate the Swedish Fellowship on your newly translated ACA Yellow Workbook. Yay! Yay! Thank you to Susanna and the others who did all that wonderful work. Where's Susanna? Okay. Where is she? Okay. Thank you. It takes a lot of hard work, and we are grateful. The fellowship, especially the Swedish Fellowship, is grateful, but all of us. Now, most of you aren't aware of this, except for the fact that David just said it, that I've been on the Board of Trustees for World Service, and I've actually been on the board for 6 years. I'm very grateful to have had this opportunity to serve the fellowship in this capacity, and I'm also grateful to the other board members of World Service, both those in this room and those who have come before us. As of yesterday, I am no longer a board member. Yay! No. I've served the limit, and that's a good thing. I'm fortunate to have been the board chair the last 2 years. The people who decided that 6 years was enough were very wise, and I'm grateful. It's time for me to leave and for others to continue the work of helping the fellowship grow for the future. I'd like to introduce those board members who are here, and I could tell you stories about each and every one of them, but I won't do that. That'll take up all my time. And this is my time. But I do want to say generally that I've been very grateful for the friendships that I've made and the support that I've experienced. But I'd like to introduce them each individually. I'm going to start with my Brit, who is from Denmark, and many of you have met her. She's been with the board for 5 years. I've for 5 years been the vice chair for 4. I met Margaret 6 years ago in Denmark. I thought I had that pronunciation down pat and found out last night I don't. We've been through a lot together, and I appreciate and I'm very grateful for her friendship and support. But so she's the only one who gets individual accolades, because otherwise, like I said, it'll take up all my time. Bill D. from Florida. Bill, if you want to stand. He's been on the board. Bill's been on the board 3 years, and he just completed 2 years as our treasurer. Thank you. Charlie. Okay. Charlie's from Virginia. He's been on the board for 3 years also, and he's our new board chairperson. Okay. I'm going to introduce someone who's not in the room, and that's Marcia, who is also leaving the board. She's not here because on Monday she left with an unfortunate souvenir of this trip. She broke her ankle, and the doctor advised her to go home. So we wish her well. Marcia was our board secretary. Jim B. Jim's from Florida and sometimes California. We're not sure where he lives, but he's been on the board for 2 years, and he manages our technology. Okay. And then David, who introduced me, David's from Florida mostly, and he's been on the board for 2 years, and he's our new board vice chair. Okay. And then, okay, thank you. And then we have Carol. Carol's from California. She's been on the board for 2 years. She's our regional board trustee. Okay. And Miles. Fishing. Oh my gosh. All right. Miles is from Ontario, Canada. He's been on the board for a year, and he's our new board secretary. And then there's Pat. Pat is from California. Pat's been on the board 1 year, and she's our new board treasurer. Or what WSO treasurer, actually. Okay. Nice. And then Erin. Erin is from Pennsylvania, and she is a brand new board member as of yesterday. So, welcome, Erin. And then there's one more board member, Rich, who lives in New Mexico, and he wasn't able to make the trip, but we welcome him. He's new as of yesterday also. Okay. Thank you. I also wanted to thank 2 previous board members who have been special to me through the years, and they are not here tonight, but they're here in memory for me. And that's Karen R. and Martin C. They've been instrumental in my recovery. I'm here to tell you that service provides great opportunities for growth in recovery, whether that's in your meeting or at an intergroup level, or some service level, or even at the World Service at a committee level and or at the board. The theme of this convention is courage to change, as we all know. The words courage to change are part of our Serenity Prayer. And I'd like us all to say that now, please. God, grant us serenity. Accept the things I cannot change. Courage to change the things that I can. And the wisdom to know the difference. In our Big Red Book, if you've had it translated, if you don't speak English, hopefully, if you haven't had it, hopefully you'll get it soon. There's another version of the Serenity Prayer in a chapter called Taking My Program to Work. And for those of you who know that, I'd like you to say that one now, please. God, grant me the serenity to accept the people I cannot change, the courage to change the one I can, and the wisdom to know that one is me. In the meetings that I go to, we say the traditional Serenity Prayer in the beginning and then this one at the end. I would actually like to come up with a hybrid, the people and things, but nobody's asked me to do that yet. It's been in my mind. Each of us in this room have the courage to change because we've made the decision to walk into an ACA meeting and walk into this room in this convention. Some of you may have heard of the ACA identity papers. They are something that were written in the 1980s, and there are 3 parts to it. The third one is called Finding Wholeness Through Separation, the Paradox of Independence. And about halfway through that, there's a section called To Be or Not to Be. I want to read, I'd hoped to have overheads, but I didn't arrange for that early enough. So it says, the paradox of independence is that only in separation do we find the courage and strength to live in the world as complete human beings, capable of giving and receiving love, of creating out of a sense of wholeness. In normal separation, children are reassured by leaving and returning to consistent and loving parents, and then carry these parents inside to remind themselves they are safe and loved. As children of alcoholics and other dysfunctional families, we internalize parents who are filled with rage and self-hate and who have projected these feelings onto us. We carry this negative view of ourselves, feeling insecure and frightened of our own self-rejection and of being rejected by others. We remain in this same double bind we experienced as children, unable to detach from or remain with the people who caused us harm. And that is until we begin our recovery. Through the inventory of Step 4, we begin to find out more about who we are. The spiritual principles of Step 4 are honesty, self-honesty, and courage. And later in Step 4, it says, we ask you to balance any shameful or fearful memories that might arise with the knowledge that you have honesty and courage in your life. ACA is not an easy program to work, but your courage is apparent and shows in working this step and the 12 steps of ACA. Adult children have an inner strength that has always been there. And then Step 6, it says, we have also looked at stored trauma and frozen feelings and our spiritual beliefs. We sense that we have an inner courage that has always been there and which is now emerging. There have been times in my life when I've asked, why me? When so many people around me won't even consider getting help or staying with this program once they've come. A program that offers so much healing. I've never figured out the answer to that. I give myself permission to cry because I've never given my talk or given a talk without crying. And there was somebody said early on, when you've worked through all of your issues, you won't cry anymore. But that's not true. Because there's still a sadness about many things. It is just the way it is that we are here and other people aren't. I'm grateful that we're here. I grew up with an alcoholic father and a codependent mother. I was the oldest of 6, and I learned how to parent very early. I feel like I must have been, though, in a constant state of dissociation at various times in my life, because I have very few memories of my childhood, like many of you in this room. Some have come back to me through the years, because that's what it says in the solution and in the promises in our literature. A vivid memory that I have, even though I don't have many, one that I have is at the age of 2. We lived in an upstairs flat. We were getting ready to go out, and my younger brother was in his stroller. He was about about 6 to 8 months old. And my mother forgot something and told me to watch his stroller. And I'm still sad about this. The floor was slightly slanted, and his stroller went down the stairs. He didn't get hurt, thank goodness. But my mother was so scared, and she screamed. She didn't know what to do with her anger, and she screamed and she blamed me for him going down the stairs. I almost didn't let him out of my sight for a long time after that. I'm going to take a drink. Because I was so traumatized by that. When I was 4, I even tried to take a butcher knife after a neighborhood bully because he was teasing my brother. My mother, fortunately, saw that happen, or saw me leave the house, and she stopped me. But that's actually one of the family stories that's funny. Everybody laughs about that. But there's a real sadness behind that. That at 4 years old, I thought that was my job, to take care of him no matter what. I actually didn't expect to be crying this much. But my hypervigilance is another thing that I learned. And I think that mostly came from waiting for my dad to come home at night. We, in the Midwestern states of the United States, we have darkness starting early in the evening. And in the winter months, we would wait to see my dad's headlights reflect off the wall. And if it was late enough, my mother would send us upstairs to bed. It was one of the few things that she did to shield us, or try to shield us. There were times, though, that he came up and got us anyway, because he said it was too early to be in bed. I think I don't blame my mother for not shielding us more, because she spent most of her adult life being in bouts of depression and just frustrated from raising 6 children alone. But I've come to understand that. My overdeveloped sense of responsibility told me that it was my job to keep all my brothers and sisters in line. Now, there's 17 years between myself and my youngest brother. And so I was ready to leave home when he was young. But of the older ones of us, I thought it was my job. And that was because I didn't want to give my dad a reason to be upset. But that was not going to happen. That wasn't a winning proposition for me, because if he was ready to be angry, he would be. He would take the 3 oldest of us especially and line us up against the wall in the kitchen, and we'd get lectures. And my brother would frequently get punished, and that was a belt on. We had to watch. My sister would sometimes challenge him. She's 3 years younger than me. She challenged him, and she would get slapped. I don't know if she got spanked or not. I don't recall that. I remember vividly standing against the wall, thinking to myself, I hate you, I hate you, I hate you. I wish you would die, about my dad. I don't remember getting punished. I have no memory of that. But I waited for it to be turned on me. I waited for it to happen to me. And what I came to learn is that I had survivor guilt, because it didn't happen to me. And I told myself, though, that I should have done something to stop it. I was the oldest, and I should have stopped it. But I also learned that there wasn't anything I could do. I was powerless over that. I used to minimize what happened to me because I didn't have any broken bones or bruises. But mine are emotional scars. And I was told and came to learn that they can be as damaging as the physical scars. So fast forward, I married an alcoholic. Surprise. We met in college, and we got married when I was in my last year of school. And all of the signs of alcoholism were there. He got arrested he got arrested. Anyway, all the signs were there. But I didn't know any different. We had 2 beautiful daughters, and I kept telling myself it would get better. I became more and more controlling as time went on, and codependent, just like my mother. We fought just like my parents. Something I said I would never put my children through, but I did. And then at a certain point, I started going to the doctor a lot because I said to myself, please find something wrong with me to explain why I feel so bad. Luckily, they never did, but the doctor eventually sent me to a therapist. And the therapist said, you're living with an alcoholic. Something that, you think back and you think, God, that should have been so obvious. But we live in denial. I did. Our daughters at that time were 8 and 4. And I went home and I said, I want you to go to be evaluated for your drinking because I think this is a problem. And he agreed. In between in the week in between, he actually had his last drunk. And I called my brother-in-law. I didn't know who else to call. We weren't close, but for some reason I called him and found out he was in AA, Family Secrets. And he took him to a meeting, and my husband never drank again. We went to the evaluation anyway, and they said that I was the one who needed help. Big surprise. In a group therapy session at that recovery weekend, it was for spouses, there was a woman who said, at least my kids weren't affected by my husband's drinking. And my inner child, for the first time, I believe, spoke up, and I actually physically got up and I said no. Because I knew that I had been affected, and I knew that my children were affected. And that was before I knew there was anything, there was ACA or anything. Right after that, I joined Al-Anon, and that was in 1983. I found an amazing sponsor who, within 2 years, found out about ACA, or as we called it in the Midwest, ACOA. She said she thought that's really where I needed to spend my time and look into it. I was fortunate enough at that point to go to a seminar or a retreat with Claudia Black, who wrote the book, It Will Never Happen to Me. And it was she who said that she thought that there wasn't any incest in my family, but there was an emotional incest with my father, that his lack of boundaries and having friends over and telling dirty jokes and not paying any attention to the fact that I was like a 10 or 12-year-old girl, that the lack of respect and the lack of boundaries and the lack of feeling valued was important for me to work with. I came back and I started my first ACA meeting. It was either late 85 or early 86. I don't know, because I lost a lot of information in a basement flood many years ago, or somewhere in between. I only have a record of a check that I wrote to the church where we had the meeting in early 1986. So courage to change. There had always been little things through the years that in retrospect showed me that I had courage, the courage to change. In high school, I changed groups of friends because I was tired of listening to the constant gossip and we're better than they are kind of talk. I don't know how I had that courage. I went away to school on my own, even though it would have been easier to go to a different school with somebody that I knew. And that felt courageous to me. I left a job with a boss who picked on and shamed people the way my dad had. And that was right after college. I knew he was going to turn on me too. And I knew I wasn't going to be going to place myself in that position because I didn't have any tools to stand up to him. So something gave me the courage to leave. When I joined Al-Anon and then ACA, I started to understand more about who I was and why I did things the way I did them. And in spite of the problems that still were going on in my marriage, I kept working on what I thought was the next best thing for me to get better. I always felt I could do more than I was, but how? I remember sitting in a seminar and looking at the presenter, who happened to be a woman, and telling myself that that's what I wanted to do someday. But the thought of standing up in front of anyone, especially a group of adults, was something that I couldn't imagine doing. I was actually a high school teacher at the time, and dealing with teenagers back then didn't seem like a big stretch. I was an adult. They listened. Not so much that way anymore, I guess. The program had after a time getting in the program then, the program opened me up to possibilities, different things that I could do. Someone in ACA told me about Toastmasters, and I had the courage and willingness to change and walked through that door. I was always the person at a party who was asking the host, can I help you? Can I help you serve? Can I help you clean up? It was anything to avoid having to make small talk with people or have conversations. I couldn't do it. I was so insecure. What if I say something wrong? What if I don't know how to relate? What if I sound stupid? In Toastmasters, they do something that they call table topics, where you're given a topic and you have to speak spontaneously for a minute. And that was like torture in the beginning, but I eventually learned to love it. One that I remember vividly was pretend you're at the elevator and you're going up, and suddenly you're in the elevator with the CEO of the company, the president of the company, and he's looking at you like you need to talk. So I learned how to do that, and then from there I met somebody in Toastmasters who helped me find a graduate school program that I went to and enjoyed very much. And then things snowballed. I developed a personal philosophy that unless a situation or person was completely hopeless, that I would hang in there. Because the person I'm having trouble with is my opportunity for growth. If I don't figure it out with this person, I'm going to meet them along the way. Perhaps a dozen times again until I master it. And I always tried to listen to my inner child along the way too, because if it got too scary, I had to make a decision whether I stayed or left. But mostly I was able to assure her that with the help of the program, with the help of my sponsor, my fellow travelers, we could make it through, that we could handle whatever came along. Sometimes to get my point across, I played the devil's advocate, and I'd had people come up to me after meetings and say, wow, I wish I could say that. I can't imagine how you said that. There was the program behind me. That was me finding a way to say what I needed to say, or what I felt I needed to say. The philosophy of hanging in there applied to bosses and anyone I worked with, even in service work. What can I learn about me in this situation? It wasn't looking I wasn't looking to have constant pain by being around these people. I was looking to learn more about me, and they were my teachers. Most of them were passage people for me. That's a phrase that I heard a long time ago. People who were in my life for a while so that I could learn a lesson, and then we both moved on. And I didn't go through all of this alone. As I said, I had my Al-Anon sponsor for a while. She stuck with me for several years. And then I had therapy. I had my meetings. I had other co-sponsors, other ACAs, anything that I could find. I also had around my neck, and I don't have it anymore, and I don't know how I lost it, but I had a small gold chain that did not have a charm on it or anything. So what would happen is that the clasp of the chain would work its way around the front eventually. And every time it did that, I would say the Serenity Prayer as I turned it back. I wore that with me. I wore that to work all the time. I wore that constantly. And the people around me didn't know that I was doing that. But that was my way of centering myself consistently throughout my day. And it was a good thing. My recovery led me to many challenges at work, and all of the things that I had done to learn how to stand up in front of a group. I started with a training department at the company I was at, and one thing I had to do was introduce presenters to a group of upper-level management. And this was a large corporation, and so the managers were rather intimidating to me, but I found myself standing up there, dry throat, heart pounding, voice almost ready to crack. The first few times I did it, I thought I was going to pass out, or completely embarrass myself. But I made it through, and what I learned to do was to slow down, take a drink of water, breathe, and tell myself, you can do it. You can do this. I didn't have that in me before the program and before the things that I did to change my path. Within a few years, I was actually a presenter then. But apparently I was pretty boring to watch because my manager said, we want you to take acting classes because you need to be more demonstrative. You need to be more lively. So I said, well, what about improv classes? Because I'd actually been looking at taking improvisation, and they said, yes, that would be fine. And so I ended up enrolling in Second City Improv, which we have in Chicago, and they have it in other places. And I learned to speak before thinking instead of the other way around. I had a upper level manager once. I was describing that, and she said, "Oh, I could never do that. I could never. What if I said something wrong?" Oh. That explained a lot about her, though. Actually, but even my confidence grew, and it was just doing the next right thing for myself. So, and here I am in front of so many of you in this room. I have to admit that my inner child is actually fairly calm. She knows we're with our chosen family. And that, unlike my family of origin and others that have been in my life, if I make a mistake, you won't get mad at me. You won't judge me. Little Mary Jo is mostly at peace these days because my critical inner parent does not have much of a voice anymore. She's still there at times, but she doesn't take up as much space. The loving parent is there instead. Okay, so I've been a continuous member of this program for 33 years, but why? Haven't I learned enough yet? It's because it works, even when it was hard to make it work. Sometimes I don't like to tell people how long I've been in the program because their expectation is that I know all the answers, which I do, but no. Or that I've learned how to make life seem perfect all the time, which that's never going to happen. Because life has ups and downs, no matter who you are, no matter where you live. And that maybe there's something wrong with me. Maybe that's why I've been in the program this long. Because how come I didn't get so much better long before this and just leave? I don't need meetings anymore. But, yeah, is there something wrong with me? A lot less than there was 33 years ago. Yeah. I used to joke that I'm a slow learner, but that's not the case. I sometimes say that I'm a member of the Church of ACA, and I've decided that this is where I'll stay. My favorite analogy is about the onion and all those layers. I could stop peeling that onion, but there's so much more there. I'm amazed sometimes at things that I find out about myself still. Maybe I knew it, but I just didn't want to think about it. And now I'm in a place where I'm ready. There's so many parts of me that I continue to learn about. I'm convinced that there's no other way out there to find the internal peace that I found so much of the time when I'm paying attention. I know I wouldn't be where I am without the service work I've done also. I have used service work to learn more about myself and hopefully help others in the process. Sometimes it's not easy to see how those things are connected, but as we say, you have to give it away to keep it. And that's the same as we talk about when we sponsor people, when we work with others as fellow travelers. I can encourage you to give service in your meeting if you're not already. I encourage you to give service at other levels of ACA when you're ready. And don't expect people in service to be perfect. We are not. They are not. Anybody else in the room, we're not. We're adult children trying to work our program. We understand that things don't just happen without someone stepping up and doing the work. Translations need extremely dedicated people. There are very many committees that need help. You can find out about them in Boulevard and 5, I believe, where there's a table with people who will help answer your questions. When I first got involved in World Service Committee, when I first got involved in my first committee, it seemed like everything I had done up until then was leading me there. I can't explain that completely, but it just felt like it was all coming together. And now that I've left the board, I will continue to help in different ways, but I will also take more time for me, which is a good thing. I'll spend more time this summer with my grandkids, and that helps me think about my granddaughter, Julia, when she was 2 years old. She used to like to build things with her big Legos. She built what she called towers. And my plan was you build a tower and you make it last. You build it right. You reinforce it. That's what I learned growing up. I didn't learn how to play very well. But she didn't have the patience for that. She built it and she knocked it down. And that would bother me. So the next time, I would try to convince her to build it differently. And not knock it down. Let's see how tall we can make it. But she didn't go along with that. She was 2 years old. She's a child. She wants to play. The turning point came for me when she said, "Grandma, you knock it down." That wasn't easy for me to do. I didn't know how to play like that when I was young. Or maybe I did and I just don't remember. But the first time I knocked it down, it was amazing. I realized that I was truly learning to play, and there was fun in knocking things down. They didn't have to be reinforced. Now I'm doing the same thing with my grandson. Are you sure you don't want to? And then I stopped myself. I have the courage to change. You have the courage to change. And together we can do amazing things. There are many slogans and acronyms that I've learned through the years. One that stands out that I don't hear very often that means a great deal to me is HOW, H-O-W, which stands for honest, open, and willing. That's what the program has taught me, and that's what will help me continue to make what I always hope will be good choices. One of my service sponsors reminds me, Mary Jo doesn't just happen. I've got to work at it. And now that I'm done with this talk, I can breathe better. Nah, I'm breathing okay. And also, my loving parent does not look back at the shoulds. There are certain wiser people than I am in this room, certainly, and they would have probably said this or they would have said that. But unlike 33 years ago, I won't lose any sleep over what I didn't say or what I did say. I said what I needed to say at the time today, and I hope that you found it helpful in your recovery journey. And I hope you enjoyed the rest of this convention. Thank you for listening. Thank you. Thank you.